In an interview last week, John Ashton, former president of the Faculty of Public Health, states that the UK response to COVID-19 is flawed. This cannot be sorted by three men in London telling people what to do. It's got to be social mobilization by people. We need multidisciplinary science, 360-degree total science, not just biological science. Culture change, he states, involve engagement with the public. We need the community's lived experience. The community must lead this because they are having to carry the brunt of it. Good afternoon, everyone. As we struggle to grapple with what's going on, I will refocus my lecture today to the necessity of multidisciplinary knowledge in our research, the importance of collaborating across disciplines, the need for a more total approach that mobilizes the community to engage with the public and to tap into their lived experience. And the communities that I will be advocating for today are that of the creative and the neurodiverse communities. I want to thank you for taking time to join this online. Thank you to those on the front line at Frankfurt University Hospital and elsewhere. I am grateful to Professors Andrea Reif and Barbara Franke for the invitation, and to Cora Katrine Adam for coordinating my visit, and now to take the conference and my lecture and masterclass online. Of course, we are all in this together, but social inequality means that we aren't affected the same way. High-speed internet, for instance, isn't a reality for many. On my part, I will try to make my talk less dense than usual. We are recording this and will make this video public. I'll also upload my transcript. Please do tweet notes, questions, and challenges with the hashtag neurodiversity creative research, a little bit of a mouthful, or email me. My invitation today for colleagues from the CoCA consortium, which is already a highly interdisciplinary group, is to collaborate with neurodiverse and creative colleagues as consultants, as allies, as critical friends, and as fellow experts. Some of you may already do so, or indeed identify as neurodiverse yourself, or have family members who are. If so, I do invite you to consider how does that complicate and enrich your work as a scientist? How could we foreground that? What is or how is knowledge extended? Are there new insights, new questions? I will share 10 reasons that I have outlined and thought through, and I will draw on examples, including from my own collaborations. But I'm very keen to hear your feedback. I'm very keen to hear what you think of some of my draft questions and reasons, to know if they are interesting, relevant, or too broad and too rough and need a lot more tweaking, fine-tuning. So I'm very much welcome. I very much welcome your feedback. First up, joining forces with neurodiverse and creative allies can enable us to up our game. And we have to, because humanity is in crisis. We live in times of emergencies of health, mental health, climate, democracy, human rights. The game has changed. The stakes are higher. It just can't be business as usual anymore. As UK Research Councils state, creativity is required to tackle the big research challenges over the next 10-20 years. This is not just in the co-creation of novel approaches, but because in our technologically mediated world, a, quote, still higher premium will be placed on human skills such as creativity, judgment, and intellectual agility, end of quote. These words echo the words of the World Economic Forum, which states that we must foster what differentiates human from machine, which is creativity, within what it calls the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And I would argue that artists have always been creative and always moving in an agile manner, crossing and indeed trespassing boundaries that are physical, cultural, intellectual. Artists confuse us and provoke us. And I would argue that it is precisely when resources are scarce, when minds are closed, when news are faked, and when people become more tribal that maybe art can up its game and play a more critical role than ever before. Art can open up platforms for dialogues that play on its ambiguity and complexity to provoke new insights and questions. And working together, we can interrogate each other as critical friends. A critical friend is a trusted person, one who asks provocative questions, who provides data to be examined through another lens, and offers critiques of a person's work as a friend. Now, this takes time. It takes time, but not in order for the critical friend to grasp all the details, which would be quite impossible at specialist levels, but to at least understand the contexts of the work. The critical friend is an advocate for the success of the work. So yes, we do come from different backgrounds and approaches, but we have the same overarching goal. Pain, Speaking the Threshold, was a 3-year interdisciplinary project in which art became a critical friend to medicine, with the aim of improving the quality of medical dialogue. Artist Dr. Deborah Padfield, who was my colleague at University College London when we were doing our fine art PhDs, worked with a facial pain specialist at University College London Hospital. Deborah led an interdisciplinary team that includes an art psychotherapist and senior researchers in art, medical, anthropology, English, history, and psychology to further research of the value of visual images in the diagnosis and management of chronic pain. So what Deborah did was to co-create with patients over 1,000 photographic images that expressed their pain. And from this, she made a pilot pack of 54 pain cards, which were trialed as a communication tool in clinical consultations at UCLH. An in-depth analysis of the effects of using visual imagery in the clinical setting was produced using theories of narrative, metaphor, and translation drawn from linguistics, methodologies in medical anthropology and history of medicine, theories of empathy from health psychology and psychoanalysis. This and several others of Deborah's projects have been highly acclaimed and held as exemplary in the fields of critical medical humanities and arts and health. A related term to critical friendship would be productive antagonisms. I created this framework while working with a geographer on our work on running. Productive antagonisms is an agile, collage-like framework to mix and mismatch knowledges of bodies, of people from different disciplines. So what we are thinking of is not to ask for artificial harmonies between or across disciplines, but indeed frictions and collisions in a constructive way. Productive antagonisms emphasize a willingness to run across the boundaries that separate disciplines to see what happens. Artistic input is key in this because of its playful, ill-disciplined nature. Because productive antagonisms requires a willingness to explore, to experiment, and to mess about with the unexpected. And it is where very different disciplinary knowledges rub up against each other where the most fertile paths are to be found. Perhaps like in this event, in which experts in the arts and sciences of the mind could speed date or play the field, or rather the gallery space. So this was an event that some of us organized at the South London Gallery, in which people could have very fast interactions with one another. So it was fast, fun, and hopefully arousing, and way better than encounters through Tinder. Speaking of fun, let's play, and let's get serious about the role of play as part of the solution. The project Playing a Part investigates the experiences of autistic girls through drama, interactive media, and participatory arts. Now, autism is a striking reference because of its relatively better developed trajectory culturally, politically, and perhaps scientifically. The paradigm shift as advocated by Professor Francesca Heppe and others in thinking about autism not as something to be treated but as an alternative cognitive approach have helped to create fundamental shifts in research culture in autism. So we find autistic people embedded as active collaborators, not passive subject, as also exemplified in this project Playing a Part. Playing a Part is led by Professor of Performance Nicola Shaughnessy in conversation and collaboration with the Psychology Department of Surrey. She is also founder of the Research Centre for Cognition, Kinesthetics and Performance at Kent. Rather than experiments in front of a computer, key are novel methods of creative practice, embodiment, doing things, playing, using puppets, to explore how they impact the self-perception, the mental well-being and self-esteem of the participating adolescent girls. There is also a steering group of autistic women, several of whom are successful authors, performers, artists. As we know only too well, girls and women are a hidden issue in neurodevelopmental disorders and a hidden resource. Now, to play is to be ill-disciplined. Working with Professor in Psychiatry Philip Escherson, who is on the impact board of CoCA, I like to think of being ill-disciplined as playfully trespassing disciplines and subverting how we understand illness. My own unexpected diagnosis of ADHD, dyslexia and dyspraxia in autumn 2015 generated questions, not clarity. So what did I do? Well, I created this drawing. The drawing shows me and my service animal. However, my service animal is not a dog, although I do love huskies. But in my case, my service animal is a cat, because I am your crazy cat woman. I don't walk beside my service cat. My cat, in this case, is depicted as part of my body, an extension of my body. In fact, is a cat suit. I wear it. Possibly with Velcro because zips are fiddly. And this cat is super smart. She's really high tech. And she assists with things that I struggle with. Reading, writing, listening to boring conferences. Not this one, which is incredibly fun so far. But I'm very inclusive, so the cat suit is designed for everyone. In fact, if so-called neurotypical people wear it, it will enrich their lives to make them a little bit more ADHD. So this drawing is in the Wellcome Trust image library, so you can search it on the but if you type the address above. Interestingly, this image remains the only other image under the term ADHD when you Google it in this collection, which is next to a bottle of Ritalin. Now that's a little bit rubbish. It's almost like if you Google the word food, all you get are McDonald's fries, very soggy and very sloppy. working together, we can step out of our respective silos. As we think a little bit more about what a 360-degree approach that Professor John Ashton urges in the face of the coronavirus could be, I would like to propose, for our case, to consider diversity and neurodiversity as valuable resources. And this means that we wouldn't be able to just defer knowledge and expertise to that held by dead white men anymore, but begin to perhaps listen to and to learn from other minds, other beings, other bodies of knowledge, pun fully intended. The title of today's discussion refers to the term neurodiversity rather than just ADHD, which admittedly is a handful on its own. Now, neurodiversity is a controversial, contested, and complex term, and I'm using it today in recognition of the comorbid nature of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I think I might have learned this from the work of a world-leading group funded by EU Horizon 2020, which studies how ADHD relates to other conditions. And of course, as we know, ADHD is strongly interrelated to a host of other neurodevelopmental conditions. The activation of the word neurodiversity also helps us to focus our attention to discourses around biodiversity. As Simon Baron-Cohen points out, this helps us to recognize the importance of the rich diversity of the life forms that inhabit it, and to consider neurodiversity as a more respectful way of thinking about our planet and our communities. I really like this approach because it really helps us to tear away from the rather binary thinking that exists in different communities about how ADHD, for instance, is only about deficits or only a superpower or only one thing or the other. Obviously, it isn't. Of course, it is complex. And in the dimensional way of thinking about neurodevelopmental conditions, know what we are on different ends of a spectrum. And I think that really helps us to understand, that really helps us to enrich the conversation and to widen the conversation a little bit more than a binary approach. So to relate it to biodiversity, I think is really strategic. It's really nice. And to grasp a more total vantage point, we can guide each other to get away from our respective comfort zones, our stale habits, to learn from and to do things with one another, to go where each other cannot go alone. In 2017, I left my own cozy world of art and gatecrashed into the world of mind and brain sciences, into your world. And I did that with a project called Magic Carpet, which was an art and psychiatry project exploring mind wandering. In many ways, this was a public dialogue, my public dialogue with Professor of Psychiatry Philip Acheson, whom I'd approach to find out why my brain was considered abnormal in your world. And art was my process of inquiry as a woman, as an artist, curator, and researcher. So I became the first artist in residence at the Social Genetic and Developmental Psychiatry Centre at King's College London. Mind wandering, which refers to the engagement in self-generated thoughts unrelated to the external environment, is a universal human experience. Yet excessive mind wandering can be impairing. And this is what Philip and his team, including Flo Molam, Natalie Bogilova and others have been looking into. And they're looking into the ways to use mind wandering as a biomarker for ADHD. At the same time, there are strong traditions in the arts that celebrate restlessness of the mind, of the body, as very much part of the creative process. Notions around drifting, around stream of consciousness, and so on. So magic carpet is therefore where art and psychiatry collide and possibly create sparks, which is also why the tapestry can be activated as a carpet. You can put it on a floor. For Philip and myself and colleagues from our respective worlds to sit on, to chat about our minds and brains and the different ways of thinking about them and different beings. And the tapestry itself can be understood as a snapshot of the landscapes encountered by my restless minds. And because words may be challenging or overrated, we also make drawings, therefore making our wandering minds visible. And several of you, colleagues from the CoCA consortium, have very kindly contributed to the process. For instance, at the 5th European Network for Hyperkinetic Disorders conference in Edinburgh. So the tapestry opens up a physical and creative space for productive antagonisms, for mental health professional service users, or people who don't care about mental health, people who don't care about art, and people who don't buy ADHD together. And I like to think that the carpet helps to do so in a slightly less hierarchical way, because it upsets that power dynamic in a clinical setting a little bit. So far, more than 10,000 people aged 2 to 85 have stepped into Magic Carpet and the various worlds that it's created through its exhibitions, workshops, performance lectures, and panel discussions. The impacts have been multimodal. Magic Carpet extends the ambition of the growing sector in arts and health in the UK, with its embrace and activation of high quality and well-made artistic outcomes that build cultural intelligence while remaining accessible and engaging. 100% of the feedback for several events stated that the work has improved their understanding of how art and science could come together. People with ADHD say that the project has created a home for them, a safe space for them, and that's very humbling for me to know. Magic Carpet won a National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement Images Competition Award for Culture Change in 2018. Judges described the winning image as challenging and thought-provoking, and captured vividly what it feels like to be caught up in the thrill of creating new knowledge which challenges and changes the world. Colleagues at SGDP say that they've become interested in not just the deficits but the positive aspects of ADHD. Philip describes the project as a very exciting and innovative integration of art and science, and functions as a wonderful platform for the clinical and scientific community to develop an interesting dialogue. We also propose a PhD program that focuses on the dissemination and public understanding of science, of ADHD and mental health, through creative practice to stimulate critical discourse required for policy change, and to translate scientific findings into societal changes. However, the proposal for the PhD program hasn't been funded yet, but hopefully it will one day. There are many outstanding examples of art science and art health projects, and this includes the outstanding Hubbub project, which was a Wellcome Trust-funded £1 million project exploring rest and its discontents, which has significantly advanced the field of critical medical humanities to widen the sights and scales of the medical beyond the primal scene of the clinical encounter, and positions visual arts as, quote, not in service or in opposition to the clinical and life sciences, but as productively engaged, end of quote. But I would like to argue that what makes Magic Carpet different is that it is artist-led, it is neurodiversity-led, or in your terms, service user-led. Magic Carpet also demonstrates how, when scientists and artists hook up, the ensuing cultural clashes can be jarring, surprising, and productive. The magic of Magic Carpet, therefore, is not to provide answers, but to raise more questions such as around mind wandering, and how we understand illness, and the social and medical constructs of normality, and indeed how we understand one another and the world. And if we are looking for novel insights into the world, I would argue that you can go far, literally, if you work with people with ADHD, whose minds will wander, and who will lead or mislead you to unknown territories, not least because people with ADHD love to search for fresh, novel experiences, or they're just easily distracted and get into interesting digressions. As evidence in the work of colleagues in psychology, psychiatry, and so on, we are increasingly interested in reframing ADHD in not just deficit terms, but in positive terms. After all, aren't traits like courage, high-level energy, extraordinary creativity, out-of-the-box thinking, exploration of novelty, craving for knowledge, above average, openness to experience, and giftedness, which relate to ADHD, closely associated with discourses around innovation and leadership? And people with ADHD love taking risks. You might have seen my film, which was shared on the CoCA Mind the Gap blog, which was a recording of an open mic session which explores how risk-taking relates to ADHD. And in a world of upheavals, including technological, think tanks are rushing to co-opt and indeed capitalize and commodify neurodiversity. The World Economic Forum proclaims neurodiversity as an asset, and even that we are, quote, just at the beginning of the neurodiversity revolution, end of quote. This kind of thinking, of course, draws on the popular observation of the epidemic in autism in the Silicon Valley. So, which is an interesting discussion because people are saying that without autistic people, we wouldn't have the Silicon Valley and the successes of the Silicon Valley. So maybe the question is, could we think about ADHD next? Or how could we think about ADHD next? How does ADHD relate to normative frameworks of productivity, for instance? And ADHD would be interesting to look into because there are popular narratives around how distractibility was something prized in the good old days, like quite a while back when we were hunters and gatherers. But that thinking is also garnering traction in the scientific world. So the thinking goes that the hypothesis goes that in the good old days, the ADHD person would be alert to the threat of wild animals, for instance, big cats or dinosaurs or whatever those creatures might be. And because we are alert, we are always easily distracted, we're always listening out for things, that helped us to survive, that helped our families to survive, and that helped humankind to survive from certain death because we were able to get away from the big cats and the dinosaurs and so on. Maybe, however, today those traits aren't so useful anymore. Today I'm just distracted by cat videos. But I would argue that cat videos are equally integral to my survival. Here you can see people lying down on the tapestry. But I would like to just reassure you that green hair is not a requirement. Anyone is invited to lie down on the tapestry. So working with neurodiverse and creative allies can also teach us to embrace errors and failures. If play is part and parcel of the creative process, so is failure. People who are creative and neurodiverse may have very different ideas of success or outcome to those who aren't neurodiverse, and also to others who are neurodiverse, and also to within our own projects, in different timelines of our projects, a lot of people might have very different understandings of what the end point or what the outcome or what the goalposts might be. It might always be shifting. And I would argue that the value of trial and error is that you can learn from them, you can grow, you can regroup. It's not a bad thing. And I would argue that so-called errors and detours can often lead to unintended and happy discoveries and create surprising marriages of ideas. Today, humanity is heading for collapse, observes sociologist Monica Buscher. However, art can create strong-minded acts of imagination to sidestep collapse, she states. Artist Jen Southern argues that artists bring unique ways of understanding and articulating transforming research. Let's collaborate, she urges. And we need to challenge each other's ideas, methods, and beliefs. And most importantly, we need to do things differently today. In these dystopic times, we need to do things differently, she urges. Tapping into what neurodiverse and creative colleagues can do. Tapping into neurodiverse and creative colleagues can help us to do things differently. And as an artist, I like to dream, and I like to believe that together we can help to make things better, not worse. And we don't have to just stand by and watch things happen in a helpless way. So I invite you to join the Neurodiversity and Creative Research Network. This is a very new network. It's a virtual expanded hub that I co-founded and co-lead with a lecturer in pharmacy and Leverhulme Fellow, Dr. Ranjita Dittal, who is from Reading University. The network brings together practitioners and researchers from diverse sectors all over the world who share their knowledges, their critical inquiries, and local efforts. Now with 125 members since its set up 1 month ago, members are from technology, neuroscience, psychiatry, theatre, health, dance, media, art, equality and diversity, disability, and so on. And they work in different sectors, including the cultural, including museums, galleries, and also higher education, and more. We are from all over the world: London, Taiwan, Victoria in Australia, British Columbia in Canada, the Netherlands, and Exeter, Glasgow, Portsmouth. Many are neurodiverse, but many too are allies who are curious or want to learn more and want to work with neurodiverse colleagues. So here I'm sharing a question that I posed to the community. And I wanted to find out how people in the community who might be familiar with self-isolation could share or could teach people who aren't familiar with self-isolation due to the virus situation? What can we share? Because people might be feeling distraught from the changes that's happening. And I was sharing also what I was inspired by from a talk, and this was a talk by Joss Boyce, who is a neurodiverse architect, who shares that this is the time to care for one another, and I really quite like that. I wanted to create this group because I wanted to harness the energy and creativity of the group to work together in the future, perhaps in a future project. One of the things I'm thinking of was to matchmake artists and scientists and technologists together to co-create a vision, to design prototypes for an exhibition or an intervention that responds to the question, what could a neurodiversity-led 2050 look like? The year 2050 look like? And of course, this sort of work has to pay tribute to the work of all these women, neurodiverse, creative women out there before me. For instance, Jess Tom, Tourette's hero. For instance, Greta Thunberg in her climate change work. And of course, Michelle Beckett, who leads ADHD in Action. But of course, no one is saying that any of what we do is going to solve things overnight. Nothing is a magic potion. There's no magic bullet. But I would argue that especially in times of despair, we cannot lose hope. That is why people are singing during self-isolation from China to Italy. And that is also why some charities, instead of only criticizing government efforts, they're saying maybe this is a good thing. Maybe a good thing that's coming out from the current crisis is that people are realizing that we need much more robust social infrastructure to help to support the more vulnerable within the community. As US essayist Rebecca Solnit states, hope is a belief that what we do might matter. Hope is an understanding that the future is not yet written. It's informed, astute open-mindedness about what can happen and what role we may play in it. It is not assuming that you know what will happen when the future is unwritten, and believing that part of what happens is up to us. Thank you very much indeed. That's the end of my talk. Please do tweet questions, comments, challenges, or email me. At the end of the slides, I've also shared some questions that might be interesting to guide you through. I've also shared a few references. These are articles that I've written, and these are some of the references that I've referred to throughout this lecture. 3 pages of them. So that's the end of my presentation today. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye and take care.